We paid off over $67,000 worth of student loan debt and a car, and I'm going to tell you exactly how we did that in this video. Welcome to Finance Sister. This is my channel where we talk about everything related to money and also having a balanced lifestyle, because I think it's extremely important to not overemphasize everything related to money, because life is not all about money, but it does affect a lot of areas of our life. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so that you get notifications for more videos. Here's the deal. I don't know where exactly you're coming from in your financial standing, what your money habits are like right now, what's your income, how much debt you have, but I do know it is possible to get out of debt, and I found it extremely encouraging to watch other people on YouTube or go on Instagram and see people talking about paying off like large chunks of debt. And I just felt it was really inspiring, and I hope that my story today is also the same for you, that it's encouraging and motivates you to actually start paying off debt, or just start having better financial habits and think outside the box in terms of what you actually need versus what you want. Does your current spending habits actually reflect the future that you want to have? All of those things. So over the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years, we have been paying off debt, but for about 17 months, we actually paused our debt snowball, which I'll go into that a little bit, because of my husband finishing grad school. So the actual number of months that we actually were paying on debt was about 15, because we had to save up for making the move, making sure that we didn't go into any more debt for him finishing his program. And we just wanted to make sure that we were going to be financially stable and didn't want to try to aggressively keep paying off debt during that time. However, I will say that when we came back, we literally were like squeaking by to make ends meet and move without taking on any more debt or going into credit card debt. Basically, all that to say that we didn't have a chunk of money that we threw at debt when we got back, because we pretty much were at zero. My husband and I got married in February of 2017, and we knew that we both had some debt, and it was definitely talked about before we got engaged, but we didn't actually start budgeting until a couple months after we got back from our honeymoon. But we did make sure that we cash flowed our wedding. It was probably around $8,000. It was beautiful. We had a great time. I don't think that weddings have to be any more expensive than that. Just a little side note in there. But we didn't live together before we got married. We didn't combine any of our finances until we got back from our honeymoon. And then we waited a couple months because we were still writing like, okay, we're newlyweds. We want to go out to eat. We want to, enjoy being together and whatever. We had just moved into a new house together. We were renting a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house that we just didn't need all of that space, and it was about $1,300, and we made significantly more than that, so it wasn't like that was a strain. But we started budgeting in May of that year, and I looked at our expenses from the month before that, and we had spent over $1,000 on like eating out, drinks, stuff like that, which weren't not excessive drinkers or anything, but just going out and not paying attention to how much we were even spending on food was making it to where we didn't have a lot to show for ourselves at the end of the month after we paid all of our expenses. When I realized that was the case, we both sat down together. We talked about our financial goals for the future, and we looked at exactly how much debt both of us had in student loans, and we got to work. And I thought we were on the same page. It wasn't too difficult to get him on debt, just because he did have a little bit more student loans than I did, and I think that honestly helped him to jump on board a little bit more, because he's not the spreadsheet nerd person like I am. But it's important to note that when you get married, it's all your debt. It's all ours, not mine and yours using pronouns like it's ours, we are working through this together as a team because we are married, and this is how we're going to reach our financial goals the quickest, is by working together as a team. A couple months after aggressively starting to pay off debt, we ended up going and getting a brand new off the lot 2017 Subaru Impreza hatchback. And we were still under the mentality of, oh, we can afford the payment. We can afford this in our monthly expenses. We wanted a reliable car because my husband has been used to doing maintenance and repairs on all of his cars in the past and just didn't want to have to deal with it. So we justified all those things for getting a new car, not getting one used, where we had found one for like, $3,000 or $4,000 that we could have paid for in cash, but we didn't. So we added a car payment, which put us at the $67,000 total of debt, because we had approximately $44,000 in student loans combined between the two of us. The first 3 months of budgeting were definitely a little bit difficult, and I think that is with everyone. You're trying to establish what's actually realistic for your expenses and what is going to be sustainable for how much debt you have to actually get out of debt and stick with your budget. So the first couple months, we definitely fell off the bandwagon, and the car was obviously one of those. But after the first couple months, we were on track. We stayed within our budget, probably close to like $100, $150, plus or minus. So that's a great spot to get to. Is just start challenging yourself to get closer and closer to the amount that you actually allocated for your actual living expenses, and then the rest just throw it at debt. We didn't put anything into savings. We stopped any kind of 401k contribution that we were doing at the time, and everything just went to debt, because when you're aggressively attacking debt, it's not going to be, it's not long term to where you're not going to be taking advantage of investing in retirement or building a savings account for emergencies or buying a house or anything like that. That was not on the table for us while we were still in debt. So we kept our emergency fund to $1,000, just like Dave Ramsey suggests, even though we didn't follow his steps exactly to the T throughout the entire time we were on our paying off debt journey. The biggest things that we did starting out and through the time that we were living in Bend, Oregon, before we made the move to Texas, was decreasing our grocery spending from like $400 or $500 a month to about $300. We were definitely spending more on groceries, but that's just off the top of my head. And then we cut out subscriptions, things that we didn't even know we were paying for. When you look on your statement, just check through. Are you paying random fees for Apple or iTunes or Amazon or Hulu, Netflix? You don't need all of those probably. It's or cable, whatever. Just pick a couple, but the subscriptions can really start getting at you. So that would be the first place that I would look to start decreasing the actual amount that you're spending every month on a recurring basis. So another thing that we did was we downsized. We had a 9-month lease at our 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, and we downsized to a little studio apartment where we paid $750 utilities included. It was awesome. So we just had to pay for Wi-Fi on top of that, and so that right there saved us close to $700 a month. And at that time when we moved, it was in November, we paid cash for a little blue trash can. That's what I nicknamed it. It's a 1988 Bronco 2. And we ended up stopping paying off debt, or pausing, in December, January of 2018 to be able to move in July, to move down to Texas and have some type of savings that we could live off of, just in case I didn't have enough work to cover the whole monthly expense that we would have to incur while we were living down there. So We also, while we were saving, pausing, paying off debt, we decided to sell our Subaru. So we owned it for about 10 months. It cost us about 5 or 6 grand to own that thing for that long, plus insurance, stuff like that. And we were able to break even, thankfully, just because Subarus usually hold their value really well. And that was another reason why we bought it in the first place. So we ended up driving 2,500 miles, moving down to Texas in a little Bronco 2. I'll put a picture up right here. And it was totally a trip. Like, definitely would not recommend doing that. But that car was paid for in cash, and that helped us a lot by getting out of debt sooner. So $67,000, I took out approximately 20 grand from that number from the sale of, or 16.5 of selling the Subaru. So that we just sold, and that went towards our payoff amount. So we moved down to Texas. We sold everything that we owned in our little studio apartment, which we had already downsized from the house, but we made about $1,500 off of selling what we did have still left over. And we made it down to Texas. We put everything that we owned in our little Bronco 2. We didn't pay for storage while we were gone. A lot of what we owned was not that valuable, and we were able to keep the valuables that we did have with family members, since we knew that we would be moving back at some point. While we lived in Texas, I ended up getting a job working for a federal contract, essentially. I'll just leave it at that. And I would fly back and forth from Longview, Texas to El Paso. It was about an hour or two flight. And I would do a 2-week on rotation, essentially, for 3 or 4 months. I did that. And it was really, really challenging for our marriage, and just to be apart for that long, since we were still newlyweds at that time. And but fortunately, it paid really, really well. And so that was what was able to keep us from going into further debt and being able to cash flow the rest of the year in terms of our expenses. And thankfully, James was able to get his tuition covered. He got a full scholarship for his last year of his master's program. So that was a huge blessing, and we would not have been able to do it without that provision. So we're really thankful that that was the case. We did married student housing, so we could just keep one car. James would walk to school. It was really affordable. It's a 2-bedroom little apartment for $605 a month, and that included all of our utilities and Wi-Fi. So basically, we were living off of $1,500 a month, and if you wanted to see what our budget looked like at that time when we were living in Texas, where it's a cheaper cost of living area, and we were able to get that kind of housing price, then I'll put a link below in my bio for this video, so you can check that out. Being in Texas was probably the hardest time actually budgeting and being on track with our finances, mainly from the emotional standpoint. It was actually pretty easy to stay within budget. We had basically like our little date nights where we would go to Wendy's and split a Frosty, or like, go to Wendy's and get a $5 deal or something and split that. And we had a eating out budget of $20 a month, and we lived off of about $250 worth of groceries and plus snacks and stuff. But we were really, really, really tight, and we were still paying on one of my student loans, a minimum, but we were able to defer my husband's student loan since he was in full-time school, and not have to pay the minimums on that, because that would have put us over budget as well. And so needless to say, we scraped by the skin of our teeth, and my husband got a job offer back in Portland, Oregon, where we are now. And he got a signing bonus, which definitely helped with getting us on our feet, getting a different car, and being able to sell our Bronco. But we have been a 1-car family for the last 4 months, and We've only had one car for about half the time that we were on this financial journey. So that definitely helped minimize costs. Things that helped us actually get out of debt were keeping our living expenses extremely minimal, mainly from the housing cost perspective. Because I get not everyone wants to eat beans and rice the whole time, and that just really gets old, and we were the same. We always had a little bit of an eating out budget, even when we were living off of $1,500 a month in Texas. But we always kept our living expenses under $750 a month. After we moved out of our 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, which was $1,300 a month, that was about 6 months into actually starting to budget. Ever since then, we have paid $750, $600, and now $300 renting from my brother and sister-in-law for the last 6 months, which was not planned at all. But in the last 6 months, we were able to move back, restart our emergency fund, start making our minimum payments again, get a different car for $1,900. It's a great little vehicle. You can absolutely buy used vehicles that are going to last you through getting out of debt, so that you can save up and get a nicer car for cash, not get a loan. So if that's at all possible for you in your situation, we have saved at least 12 grand in our area just by living with family, keeping our expenses really low. And I totally understand that that is not necessarily a possibility or something that you want to sacrifice in order to get out of debt faster or achieve different financial goals, and that is perfectly fine. But that was a huge thing that allowed us to get out of debt at least 6 to 8 months sooner than we did, in the combination of the time that we spent living in a studio apartment, 500 square feet, and then living in a cheaper area on campus housing when my husband went to school full time, and then for the last 6 months paying $300 for rent. That has really been a game changer, and that also has allowed me to work part-time from home, and then also watch my little niece Zoe a couple hours during the mornings to also reduce our rent cost. Plus, I get to have the intangible satisfaction of being able to help around their house, doing like more cooking and cleaning, and obviously watching my little niece. And it's been a really, really sweet time. But living costs was a big thing. Cutting out on subscriptions, really paying attention to your grocery budget and making it a game out of how much you can save on certain items, not buying as much sugary foods and snacks, which definitely adds to your overall food spending budget. A lot of what you eat can be found, even if you're buying organic or local, whatever, you can definitely keep a very, very reasonable grocery budget as long as you're not spending a lot of it on snacks. And eating out, we tried to keep our eating out budget under $150 when we first started out. Then it went down to 100, and then it went down to 20 in Texas, and then we brought it back up to 100 to 150 since we moved back to Portland, Oregon, because there's just so many great places to eat. While we have sacrificed big things like housing and having a second vehicle and splurging more on personal things, like I don't go and get my hair done more than once every 6 months. I don't get my nails done. We have not bought hardly any clothes since we've been back, or for the last 2.5 years, honestly. A lot of what we get is hand-me-downs or going to used resale stores, whatever. But we did choose to go on weekend vacations to like camping, super cheap. It would be less than $100 or $200 for the whole weekend, including food, gas, and permitting for the tent, whatever it may be. That's something that we really enjoyed doing, and definitely helped us still maintain a balance of being able to feel like we were able to go out and do things, not just be cooped up at home, because we are really not just hang out at the house kind of people. We want to be out and about, going for hikes, finding free activities like that, and just being more proactive about what you go and choose to do with people, not going out for lunch or dinner as much, but more doing things, activities that you don't have to pay to go do with them. I hope this was really encouraging for you, and don't get me wrong, it is really hard, and it's a discipline of being able to tell yourself no for not having instant gratification, being able to look forward towards the goals that you're working towards and say that that's worth it, and the $5 coffee every day is not maybe worth it, or whatever it is that you're willing to cut out and sacrifice in order to reach your financial goals faster.